Hi there. In this video, we're going to attempt to explain and demystify the legendary Ingersoll SC71 10-lever auto deadlocking Nightlatch. I mean, it's widely recognised as a very, very good, high-quality lock, but it's very difficult to find information out there, which is really our fault, on why it's kind of traded on its reputation since it was launched in the 1960s, more or less unchanged since then. But I thought it was high time that we made this video and explained the benefits of this product. Sorry, this is in the editing stage, but I think I'd like to correct myself. I think I said 1960s. I meant 1950s. This is an advertisement from Punch magazine from the 8th of November 1950. Don't meet the burglar halfway. Repel his advances by fitting Ingersoll high-security locks. And there's the lock at the time that was called the RA71 at the time. That's the sort of language you don't see anymore. Ingersoll Security Advisory Bureau. And that's when the company was based in Ruislip. Prior to that, they were in Clerkenwell in London. I've changed angle now. We're just looking at the outside. So perhaps if we start with the outside, this component, which is called the cylinder, sometimes called the barrel, but the terminology we use is cylinder. And there are three features of this cylinder that made it quite unique at the time and still really to this day, certainly with two of those elements. So the first element was this uses a double-bitted key, whereas most cylinders that you find on a door, like a Yale lock or that type of thing, use a pin system where there's 5 or 6 pins or more. The key for the Ingersoll is double-sided. So you have a series of cuts across the top and a series of cuts across the bottom, 5 on each, making a total of 10 levers. So inside the cylinder, there are 10 separate levers determining the correct sequence on the key for opening the lock. Each key is uniquely numbered with no repetition. So your key number is your key number. This is just an example key number. The Ingersoll 10-lever lock mechanism was designed by the late, great Jack Taylor, who invented many, many items, and many of them were security and lock-related. His son is still in the lock industry today. His name's Andrew Taylor, and he's a very, very nice gentleman. I know him quite well. The benefit of the system with the 10 levers is that the lock is extremely difficult to pick when compared to more conventional simple pin tumbler locks. You're picking two sides at a time, which makes it very difficult to pick. There are locksmiths out there that you'll see that have picked them open successfully. They're very, very talented, skilled locksmiths who spend days and days and days of their lives practicing picking. This isn't what burglars do, which brings me on to the second feature. Burglars use brute force when they can and try and attack or drill the cylinder to gain entry. Well, the cylinder on the Ingersoll SC71 and the SC73, but we'll move on to that, has this hardened shroud. So this shroud, or what we call the dome, is actually hardened. So I have one here. This one is a brass finish, but they are all made of a high tensile spring steel. And it's very, very difficult to drill or to cut into this to try and attack the cylinder to gain entry, which is a semi-unique feature, really, that not many products have that on the market. So it makes it very, very secure. So that third feature relates to registering the keys. The keys were registered to the owner. I've got a box here, a legacy box of when the product was first available. Packaging is very different now, I'll show you that, but as you can see, it did get selected for the prestigious Design Centre London Award. That's the end there with the SC71, still in production all these years later, which is really a testament to the quality of this lock. But the bit that relates to the third feature of the cylinder, the key system, is the registration. And as you can see, it states here that no one can cut copies of your key except ourselves. There is no such thing as a skeleton key, that the keys are registered, etc., etc., key registration card. And that was the case for many, many years, decades, in fact. but eventually the patents expired and it could no longer be renewed. The keys still retain all of their security, apart from that registration aspect of it, which is no longer upheld. However, I wouldn't wander down the high street and get one of these keys cut. These keys really should be ordered from us and us alone. The keys are cut on a computer to the original code number. So using that code number from the key, our computer translates that into the correct cuts of the key, and your key will always be correct. The copy keys on the high street, while they may seem to work, they're using substitute blanks, key blanks with no cuts on them, being traced, copied, just like a sketchograph where you're just copying something, and they are imperfect. And this is a premium product. It is expensive. We recognize that. And more often than not, when we have a failure or an issue, it's down to someone having keys cut that are not original, that don't look something like this with the key registration number on them and what have you. And that has prematurely worn the lock. And it doesn't take long to do that. Of course, there's other things that come into play, lubrication, maintenance, things like that. And we do have other videos on that particular topic. I'm going to go ahead and take the cylinder out of this box just to show you how things in 50 years, how little changes there's been. As you can see, it's pretty much the same product. The only difference is that the word Ingersoll, which was embossed on here, was removed from the dome a few years ago as another security measure to stop the burglars seeing exactly what make of lock it was. That was the only reason behind that. So before we get on to the actual lock, or this piece which we call the lock case, I'm just going to look at the strike plate, the bit that the lock locks into, just to explain that for a moment. So this is the strike plate, also known as the keep, fixed on this dummy door frame that we've got here. And as you can see, the lock is going to engage in this opening. It's held on by 2 screws here and a 3rd screw here to give it lateral strength in this direction. This is a strike plate from another lock, not an Ingersoll lock. And as you can see, we have this kind of hollow construction. It's got the 2 screws for fixing it. It's also got the 3rd screw here. But this is a lightweight material and hollow. Compare that to the Ingersoll item. This is one solid piece. And the key difference you'll see is that peg. And what the peg does is the peg goes into a hole that's drilled in the door when it's being installed. And it adds reinforcement to the keep and the strike plate so that it's prevented, or it helps to prevent anyone kicking the door, jamming the door, from splitting this component out or it coming into the property as it opens. So this is a noteworthy feature on the Ingersoll lock. Again, hopefully this is demystifying some of the features of it that make it so good. This is unique. I haven't seen this on another Nightlatch from any other manufacturer. If there is another one, drop me a note in the comments. But to my knowledge, I haven't seen one that does this. Let's move on to the actual lock itself, the lock case. I've taken the Legacy, the older product, out of the box. And as you can see, it's more or less identical if I change the angle slightly. The only difference is that 3rd screw hole was added in the 1980s just for some additional strength as a product revision. You'll see that the original lock didn't have that 3rd screw hole. But other than that, that's the only difference. It's still the same product, and that's because it's that good. Well, how does the lock work? Well, as the door shuts, this component here is spring-loaded. This is called the spring bolt. And as that's depressed, the bolt comes out, and the bolt engages into the lock itself. And you'll see that as it closes, and I'm going to try and film this, you'll see that bolt coming out. I'm just opening and closing the door a little bit, and it shoots out and engages across. And it's deadlocked at that point, and it's engaged in the keep. For your security, it's very, very strong. And this particular arrangement of deadlocking means that if somebody tries to what they call slip the lock open, which is passing something through the gap from the outside, we're looking at the inside here, through the gap on the outside to try to push back the latch. Well, there isn't a latch, it's a bolt. So it's not going to go back and open. So that gives you that strength. You can open the door just by pulling the handle, and then it's open again. And there's that operation again. Okay, so there's another feature on here, which is putting the lock on the latch, if you like. So you have this particular little wheel. If I just turn that down and I now press it in, That's not coming out anymore. So that means the door can close, but it's not locked, and it'll open again without actually pulling that handle out. I'll do that again. We close, and I'm pushing it from the outside. It's not locking. So you're going out to the dustbins or something, you're not going to lock yourself out, but you do need to remember to reactivate it before you lock up, which will now lock as it did before. Okay, so that's not all. We also have double locking. So you might think to yourself, if you've got this handle here and there's glass adjacent to the door, that somebody could break a piece of glass, reach through and open it, and you'd be correct. That brings me on to the subject of BS3621, which is the British standard height mark for theft-resistant locks, which came around about in 1980, I believe. This lock was already about 20 years old when that standard came out. And that standard, the BS3621, requires key locking from both sides. So what that means is that you should be able to lock the lock from the inside, that somebody doing what I described, reaching through or through the letterbox or fishing or something like that, with a fishing rod or a tool to try and open it, won't be able to do it. So the Ingersoll lock, or this particular Ingersoll lock, is not certified to BS3621. In my opinion, it's much more secure in most circumstances than many BS3621 locks because of all the features that I've been outlining to you. But the Ingersoll lock does have an answer, or this Ingersoll, the SC71, does have an answer to that kind of reach through the glass attack, and that's double locking. So we talked about deadlocking, we're going to talk about double locking now. Now you can only do this from the outside to do now. So I've got the door shut now, and in one direction it will open the lock for me. But if I rotate the key in the opposite direction, one complete revolution, 360 degrees, and remove the key, and then we go around to the other side, we now find that the handle, which previously opened the lock, no longer opens the lock. I cannot pull it open. So reaching through, broken window, letterbox, something like that, I'm not going to get the lock open. But we recognise that's only going to work from the outside, so you can't do that from the inside. So these days, for insurance, you're going to have another lock on the door, and that other lock's going to have to be a lock certified to BS3621, but that would be like a mortise lock, what some people call a deadlock or a chub lock. That should also be on the door, so that you've got that insurance covered. If it's a flat, it's different. You'll need another certification, which is BS3681, which is to do with keyless egress and fire regulations, that sort of thing. But generally for the average house, it's going to be one of these, accompanied by, further down the door, a BS3621 5-lever mortise deadlock, key locking from both sides. So this version of the lock that we've been looking at is for typical inward opening doors, i.e. you're standing inside your property in the hallway, and the door opens in towards you, not out to the street. But we do have the SC71 variant available for outward opening doors, and actually on this lock model I have that also. So you'll see, whereas on this side we've got the inside of the lock case, up here for the outward opening. So we're now treating the door as if it's opening outwards. We've got the cylinder, this time in satin chrome, which is available, and you'll see it's opening outwards. Same lock, doesn't need to change. Nothing on the door needs to change. It's just the keep or the strike plate, which no longer has the peg. Outward opening doors are always difficult to deal with. There are very few locks on the market for outward opening doors. So this is our answer, which is this outward opening strike plate, which really is going to require a fairly skilled carpenter to install. As you can see, it's not straightforward, but it can be done, and you can fit one of these on the outward opening door rather. I mentioned earlier on about the SC71, this lock, and the SC73, which is a different version. It looks exactly like this. It's no different. But the difference is that double locking, rotating the key 360 degrees, that doesn't happen. It cannot be double locked, so the handle is always able to open the door. And those are circumstances where that's the only way out. It's a fire exit, it's maybe an apartment, something like that, and you don't want someone to inadvertently double lock the door so that somebody in the property can't get out. So these days for flats, we recommend, or any door where it's the only way out, we recommend the SC73, which you can buy on the website. I mentioned the packaging, old versus new. This is kind of what it's going to look like now when your lock arrives. That's what it used to look like. A big box with metal corners. You just don't see that anymore. But times have changed. In this modern era, just to digress for a moment, premium products such as this and fancy handbags and watches and things like that are cloned, are copied, inferior products. If a handbag lets you down, it's not the end of the world. But if a lock lets you down, if you're locked in and you can't get out or something like that, can be a big problem. Or if you can't get in, the internet is awash with counterfeits. We can't keep up with it. They arrive to us daily for inspection from clients and things like that. We don't know who's selling the genuine products, who's not selling the genuine products. We're not even sure that some of the supply chain might be corrupted through legitimate means or legitimate suppliers. We just don't know. If you want a genuine product, or you want to be certain of buying a genuine product, buy it directly from our website. As you can see, here's a link to the website. You'll get a genuine product which will be hand inspected before it's sent out. That's not to say that there aren't other genuine suppliers out there. You know, maybe rather than buy online elsewhere, go to your local locksmith shop where you know them, that have been around for a long time, and ask if it's genuine. But online, if it looks cheap, if it's much, much cheaper than the retail price that we're showing the product at, just question it. You know, be sure, be safe, check it out thoroughly before you order. I've got here some of the original marketing material from, I think this is from 1964 or 5. It's a bit old and sort of broken up, but I'll show you the lock. Here we are, originally called the RA71, which is has changed slightly now, but here's the original design, the key security. The really early locks, one feature I actually missed out. The really early locks used 2 screws to hold the cylinder to the door. That was improved early on in the product life span, and it's 4 screws. Let me show you that. So you'll see there's actually 4 screws that robustly, machine screws, bolt the lock to the mounting plate on the back of the door, which again makes it much harder for someone to try and crowbar it off or something like that. So yeah, that was a design revision early on, which made it even more secure. One last feature that I neglected to mention, I was doing this all on the fly, is the availability of spare parts. For a product that's been around for so long, you can still buy the spare parts. You can still buy the lock case. So if your one should fail, you can buy this. You can still buy the cylinder. You can still buy the keep. All as individual components, all on our website on the spare parts section. I did mention earlier on lubrication and maintenance. And I'm going to put a link at the top at this point in the video to another video that explains about that and what to look for and how to look after your Ingersoll SC71 lock. That's it. I hope I've demystified it to some point and explained what it all is. Oh, I didn't mention the colours. The lock is available in this, which is a polished chrome. It's available in a satin chrome, like that one we've got up the top and the outward opening, and also a polished brass colour, which seems to be coming back a bit now into fashion. And one last thing, again, I just remembered, is door thickness. This is a typical door, 44 millimeters thick, typical front door. Thicker doors are becoming very, very fashionable, heavy sort of Scandinavian looking doors and things like that. On our website and our website alone, you can order the lock with a fitting kit to take you all the way up to 90 millimeters. You really won't find many locks at all that can be fitted to doors 90 millimeters or up to 90 millimeters thick. So that's it. Thank you for watching.